Have you ever stared at a can of corned beef and wondered, wait a second, where's the corn? It's a fair question. There's clearly beef in there, but not a single kernel of corn in sight. The name corned beef has confused people for generations, especially since it sounds like it should be some kind of beef and corn stew. But here's the thing, this dish has absolutely nothing to do with the yellow vegetable we know today. The term corned comes from something much older and a bit saltier, literally. Today we're unpacking the curious history behind the name corned beef, how it came to be, and why this preserved meat became such a big deal around the world. Right here, on History of Simple Things. To understand the name, we have to go back to a time before refrigerators, when preserving food was a serious challenge. People needed ways to make meat last longer without it rotting, and one of the best methods they discovered was salting. Salt draws moisture out of meat, preventing bacteria from growing. But not just any salt. People often use large, coarse grains of salt. Back in Old English, the word corn didn't just refer to maize. It actually meant any small, hard particle or grain. In other words, the corn in corned beef referred to the chunky salt crystals used to preserve it, not to corn as a vegetable. So, when beef was packed in big corns of salt, it naturally became known as corned beef. This salting process wasn't just for flavor, it was survival. Before refrigeration, salting was essential for keeping meat edible on long voyages or through harsh winters. Corned beef became especially popular in places like Ireland and England, where salting was part of everyday food preservation. In fact, by the 17th century, Irish corned beef was already being exported across Europe and even to the Americas. Ironically, while we often think of corned beef as an Irish dish today, most Irish people at the time couldn't afford to eat it themselves. The high-quality beef was produced for export, while the locals mostly ate pork and vegetables. The Irish corned beef we know today became more common among Irish immigrants in America, who could finally afford the meat they once exported. Fast forward to the 19th century, when millions of Irish immigrants arrived in the United States. They brought their cooking traditions and preservation methods with them, but they also adapted to what was available. Pork was expensive in American cities, but beef was cheap and easy to find. Jewish butchers in New York were already making their own version of salted beef, which reminded the Irish immigrants of the corned beef from back home. The two food cultures blended, and suddenly, corned beef and cabbage became the go-to dish for Irish Americans, especially around St. Patrick's Day. Ironically, what many people now think of as a traditional Irish meal is actually more of an Irish-American creation. In Ireland itself, bacon and cabbage were more traditional than corned beef and cabbage ever was. Beyond home kitchens, corned beef played a surprisingly big role in global history. Because it lasted so long without spoiling, it became a staple for sailors and soldiers. During the Age of Exploration, salted meats like corned beef were essential on ships that might be at sea for months at a time. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the British Navy relied heavily on salted beef and pork, which fueled long voyages and military campaigns. Later on, during both World Wars, canned corned beef became a convenient ration for soldiers. It was easy to store, didn't need cooking, and could survive almost any condition. If you've ever seen the classic rectangular can of corned beef, that design came about to make it easier to ship, stack, and open in the field. The food we think of as humble today once had a major logistical purpose. As the years went on, corned beef found its way into cuisines far beyond the British Isles or the United States. In the Caribbean, it became a common ingredient in dishes like bully beef and rice. In the Philippines, corned beef is a breakfast staple, often fried with onions and eaten with garlic, rice, and eggs, a comfort food for many households. In Latin America, corned beef pops up in empanadas and sandwiches, and in Hong Kong, you'll find it mixed into macaroni soups at breakfast cafes. Each culture took this once simple, preserved meat and made it uniquely their own. Despite its humble origins, corned beef became a global food with local twists everywhere it went. Today, corned beef can mean two slightly different things, depending on where you are. In the U.S., it often refers to the brined, pinkish beef brisket served with cabbage, soft, juicy, and sliced from a freshly cooked slab. But in many other countries, corned beef refers to the canned variety, shredded, salty beef packed tightly into those rectangular tins. Both come from the same idea, preserving beef with salt, but the canned version is cooked, pressed, and sealed for long shelf life. The fresh kind, on the other hand, is brined and boiled, keeping more of that traditional texture and flavor. Either way, both types still trace their name and flavor back to those coarse corns of salt that started it all centuries ago. So the next time you open a can of corned beef or see it served with cabbage, remember, it has nothing to do with corn as we know it. The name is a linguistic fossil from another time, when corn simply meant grain or particle. Over the centuries, the English language shifted. Corn became associated specifically with maize, but the old name stuck. That's why it sounds confusing today. It's a reminder of how food names can preserve history just as much as salt preserves meat. Even though our understanding of the word corn changed, the deliciously salty beef that carried the name didn't. So why is it called corned beef if there's no corn? Because centuries ago, those big grains of salt were the corns that kept the beef fresh long before refrigerators existed. What began as a simple preservation method turned into a comfort food, a symbol of survival, and a culinary bridge between cultures. From Irish exports to American delis and Filipino breakfasts, corned beef has come a long way, and all because of a word that changed its meaning over time. Funny how language, like food, can evolve but still carry a little taste of history in every bite. Thank you for watching. If you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you an acknowledgement for your contribution. If you enjoyed this video, please check out our other bingeable channels. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history of simple things. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories woven through the smallest details.